Hi, everyone. This is Elisa Dixon, and this is Astrology with Elisa. And I am joined today by a very special guest. This is my astrology teacher, Pam Gallagher. Hi, Pam.
Hi, Elisa. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited you're here. Pam has been a practicing astrologer for 57 years. Pam has been teaching since 1998, and she is the founder of the Midwest School of Astrology, which was formed in 2009. And this is where I studied astrology. Pam is the first astrologer ever to give me a reading, and I rabbit holed from there. She's very gifted at what she does. And she's also an author. She wrote a book, Becoming Your Sun Sign, right here, which is available on Amazon. And I highly recommend it. And the whole premise of this book is the journey from your moon to your sun sign. So, Pam, without further ado, I don't know if you have anything else to add about you and your background and your passion around astrology before we dive in.
No, I think that pretty much explains who I am. The school is in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we are the only brick and mortar certified school in North America. There are some other online, but we actually have a schoolroom for those who live close. And we do weekend workshops so people can come and have community. And there aren't many places left where people get together for community.
Yeah, it's a really special place. It was a very special experience for me over the 3 years, coming weekly.
I always encourage people, even when they live out of town, to try to come, for a weekend. We invite speakers from around the country 4 times a year for each level. We have 3 levels. So there are a lot of weekend events. I want the students to have exposure to other professional astrologers too, because they use different language and they use different techniques. And so, astrology is a language. It's a symbolism. It's part of God's plan and it's part of the system, God's geometry. So it's not in conflict with anything. And so I want people to hear other opinions.
I love it. Well, we are here to hear from you today. So maybe start right here with this journey from the moon to the sun. You are the first person that ever saw me as I truly was from my moon sign or described me as such. So maybe let's get oriented around the moon and the energy of the moon, and we can go from there.
Okay, so the moon is our satellite of Earth, obviously. Earth goes around the sun. I think everybody knows that. However, the tropical astrology, which is a system that's the most used around the world, is geocentric. So we look from Earth out at the planets against the zodiac, and our calendar is based on that zodiac. So we start, actually, the zodiac starts on March 20th at zero Aries. We have 12 signs, 30 degrees in each sign. So you have 12 signs, 12 months. But the moon goes around Earth. And so the moon, if you go back metaphysically, metaphorically, mythically to the ancient studies, the moon has always been the indicator of feeling, emotion, water. The Earth is 75% water, and so are we. And the moon has the power, its gravity has the power to control the tides. We know that we have the highest tides on the full moon. So it also impacts the individual. It's really gravity and math. It's not suspenseful or unexplainable. So the moon then also holds that emotion, that feeling. So when you look at the moon in the charts, you understand how a person's going to respond, react, feel. And the moon is our daily timer. Even the farmers have planted by the moon because they were aware that the moon's pull, gravitational pull, impacts planting and it impacts life. Well, it impacts us. And so we watch the new moons and full moons, but when you understand the moon in your own chart, where it was, the moon goes around every month, 27 and a half days to be precise. It's 2.5 days basically to a sign. So knowing the sign that your moon is in helps you understand how you or your children or someone that you love is emotionally built and how they're going to respond. What's their natural instinct? And so it allows you to allow them to be who they are, which I think is what it's all about anyway, isn't it? It's for us to love and accept the people in our lives, including ourselves, So if you understand the moon, you understand the instinct and the feeling and the daily routine. But the moon is more about our soul instinct and how we respond to life and how we feel, how we show our feelings. So then if you understand your sun sign, then you're becoming the sun sign. Everything on this planet is growing toward the light. The trees, the plants, the flowers, the weeds, even the crystals are pulling toward the light. And so are we as a soul. So we're becoming that sun energy. I tell my clients on a good day, we express our sun sign, and on an emotional day, back comes the moon. So understanding that moon sun journey helps people understand where they're coming from, but what they're trying to add to that. We don't want to throw out our feelings. We would just like not to live in an emotional world all the time. We'd like to have some purpose, take control. So the moon sun journey, and which is why I wrote the book. I did not write the book for astrologers, although they could use it. There's a lot of language in it. Quite a few of my students who do see clients now use it for language. But you know where your sun sign is if you read any newspaper or look online. But most people do not know their moon sign unless they look it up.
One
So
thing that really made a big impact on me when I first came to see you that first time was when you were talking about how kids are going to display more their moon sign than their sun sign. And it's funny because both of my kids have earth signs as sun signs, but they both have fire moons. And it's a very different energy, and understanding that helped me look at them differently and even adjust some of my parenting.
it should. And that's what I tell parents. If you'd really like to be a better parent, then know the child's moon sun energy shift, because children are responding to life. They are not initiating action. So you're going to get their feeling, their emotion, their senses. And so if you understand your child's moon sign, you're going to understand them better and how they feel and how to talk to them about their feelings, to validate them. So knowing that helps you be, I believe, helps you be a better parent. I think every parent should do their children's charts. That's me, you know.
Yeah.
'Cause I've seen it made a big difference over the last 50 years.
So how is it best to relate to fire moon children versus earth moon children versus, water and
Well,
air?
there are four elements: fire, earth, air, and water, and which you just named. But the fire moon children, fire is action. Fire does not stand still. And if you think about fire, it's constantly moving. It's a moving energy. So if you've got a child with a fire moon, you have to understand that they need activity, they need movement. And there's a lot more spontaneity and a lot more instant response from a fire child, a moon. Three fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Now, the earth signs need grounding, need stability, and they tend to be a little more literal and practical. So if you've got a child and their moon is an earth sign, you're going to find that they want to understand, give them a reason, show them, because earth says, show me, let me see it. That's the moon energy as a child. Now the fire, earth, and then you have air. So the air children, I'm an air child, but I'm air, kind of whole air chart. Air is social and mental, talkative. And so a child, they're curious and they will talk and they ask questions and then they talk and then they get busy and then, but it's all about people and talk and socialization. And as they get older, they may get quieter, but they're usually pretty talkative as a young person because that social stuff is strong. So that's air. So you got fire, earth, air, and the last one's water. Water children, that's Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, are sensitive. They get their feelings hurt. They feel a lot more because water is inspirational and feeling and sensing. That's the nature of the water element. And so children are usually more touchy and quite frankly, want to stay closer to home. That, that security and because they're highly sensitive. So when you know that, you don't throw them out in the crowd alone. The fire signs, you're like, oh, let them go, they'll be fine. You know, not, but the water moons children are more sensitive. They need a little more protection.
And then even as they grow up, right? I mean, when they grow up into adults like all of us, when you talk about the moon as being more reactive energy, which kind of makes sense, right? Because it reflects the light of the sun. So
Right.
it is reactive to the environment. I remember you also had said that in times of stress, we revert back and behave the way our moon would dictate,
Exactly.
which can
So
also,
that's your feeling.
yeah,
You're gonna react from instinct and feeling. And so in a crisis, it was very interesting to me during the COVID season that people reverted to their moon sign, and that's how they responded to all that because it was if they weren't taking initially action, so they were reacting, they were responding, and you could see it. There was a big shift. It was interesting.
yeah, I definitely could see that in my own self looking back. Yeah. With my Capricorn moon, I was just work, work, work and organize this and organize that and needed the order. And yeah, definitely reverted back a bit.
It was fascinating to me. I mean, to be able to sit and watch. It's one thing to know this stuff, but to be able to observe it is pretty fascinating. You're like, well, there it is.
Yeah. So then going a little bit deeper into the moon, because if anybody now online, you can go pull your chart anywhere. And for the most part, you can see where your moon was and what sign. But then another nuance is the moon phase. So new moon, full moon, first quarter, last quarter, and a few in between. Pam, you're the first person that really kind of broke it down, the importance of what the moon phase is in a natal chart, and then what that shows and determines about the soul message of that lifetime. Maybe
Right.
can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Again, all the farmers in the planting use the lid bases. That's what they're using. It's not a new technique. That would be very old. And of course, every calendar tells you new moon, first quarter, full moon, last quarter. I mean, you can see them on the calendar. So obviously, there's some significance and people use it, but the moon phases, from a deeper perspective, is the development of the soul. And so, if you think of a group of lifetimes and you think, where am I? It's not that people will say, "Oh, I'm in the last phase. I'm out of here." I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. We have many, many lifetimes because, well, I envision that the soul pattern is a huge canvas. And so we have sections that we worked on that are well perfected. And then we have some empty spots that we haven't touched on, areas of experience. And then we got some that are kind of blotchy. We screwed them up. So may have to go back and tidy that up. That's our squares and stuff in the chart. But the moon phase is an indicator from a soul perspective of where I am in this cluster of lifetimes of things I'm trying to do. So, you've got new moon. Between new and full is called waxing. We're in a waxing moon now. Between new moon and full moon, 2 weeks.
Where it grows.
It grows and it's instinctive. And waxing is growth. So every day you look at the moon, it's getting a little bigger. Then it's full. That's a culminating, completing relationship based. It says, it's time now to integrate. I've been growing, pushing, doing. Now it's full moon. So if I'm born between full moon back to new moon, then I'm in an integrative conscious phase of putting it all together and then putting it out to the world. So knowing the moon phase at a soul level helps you understand a little more what drives you, what your purpose at a soul level, not a personality level here. So, but there are 8 phases in this system. I mean, there are the 4 quarters. However, that's broken down again. So there are 8 phases to the moon. And they're called new moon, crescent, first quarter, gibbous, full, disseminating, last quarter, and then balsamic. But those are just for people that are listening that might know moon phases. And so the balsamic moon is before new. It's the completing phase. And it's also called the dark moon, if you would. But from new to full, we're growing and pushing instinctively. And then we have time to integrate and pull together consciously. So it depends on where you're growing. It matters.
So what are some markers of, for example, I think I've heard that if you're born under a new moon, so that's your natal moon phase, it's the type of person that, will try anything once, right? Is that kind of a good marker of,
Yeah, because it's new and it's instigating it. Just go. It's
yeah,
new. It's like Okay, let's just do it. Very Aries in its energy.
Yeah. What about a crescent moon? What's a characteristic
Impressive.
of a
There was a very famous astrologer in the 1940s, 1950s, 60s, Dane Rudger from Austria. He was a great philosopher and mathematician as well. But he wrote a book called The Lunar Cycles, which he made this much more prominent for people. So he talked about this procession of growth. He said if you had a seed, the new moon is the seed, and it's got to break loose at all costs. It's just got to pop. It's multiplying. It's got to go. The crescent moon says, I'm really struggling. I got to go, but I can't see where I'm going. I'm, still underground. And then that seed, then we get to first quarter, and it says, okay, now I've got to push forward because now I have broken and I got to get above ground. And so there's a drive of, believe it or not, plants and consciousness, but using that analogy. So then you go to gibbous, the one before full. So it's like, you know what? I'm gathering, I'm the student. I need to gather all the nutrients that I can get so that at full moon, I go full bloom. So you imagine the plant coming up and then the bloom opening. And it's like, here I am. I'm in my full state of beauty here. And so now I'm interacting with the world, so it's a relationship sign. Then you go to disseminating and it says, now the next process is I got to start my pestles and all my pollens, and I got to distribute everything, my knowledge. I have to distribute what I gathered. And then you go to last quarter with this, wait a minute, I'm coming to the end of the season here as a plant. What do I need to get rid of? These outer leaves, they're all growing up, they drop them. I don't need them. So there's this tendency to get rid of. And then you go to balsamic, and it's like, this is the last phase, and I'm finishing up. So I'm was born under the balsamic phase. I'm very familiar with that. So finishing up many experiences of my life through being married, raising kids, doing corporate work, studying astrology, and then ending up doing what I never thought I'd do, which was teach. So here I am.
Well, thank God you did.
I had to work my way into that. So
Yeah. Well, so it's funny because when you were talking about new moon energy and it's very much like Aries, and then you were talking about the crescent moon and that you kind of you've got these obstacles, but you got to push through and keep fighting. That struck me as like very Mars type energy, and then with the first quarter, kind of almost like decisions, right? Is like where it's like, am I going to do this? Am I not going to do this? How am I going to do this? The gibbous, where you're still growing and gathering, that strikes me as kind of like the curiosity, almost like the Gemini curious of building information. And then the full moon, of course, is like the big spotlight of what's happened. Am I kind of reading this right?
yeah,
Yeah,
fine. It's just another, you're using another allegory and that works. Roger used the seed to the plant to the full bloom and then dropping his leaves and then like the tulip pulling its energy back into the soul as one analogy, but also from a human perspective, using that kind of language is good. People need to understand what am I doing here?
right,
What
right,
what at a soul level, what's the purpose?
right.
Yeah, that is a big question.
So I almost feel like then kind of going back around, I wanted to check with you to make sure I was on the right track here with my thinking. But then, like to the disseminating part where you're sharing the knowledge and everything, that almost seems like very Aquarian, right? Spread it out to everybody. Last quarter, I personally am a last quarter moon. And, when it's talking about letting go and recalibrating, I think about all of my tendencies to constantly declutter my house. I'm constantly trying to get rid of things. So maybe that's a tendency of a last quarter moon.
It is.
Um,
It is. Get rid of what you don't need.
yeah, I'm doing it all the time. I drive everybody crazy. And then the balsamic is when you're really kind of just quietly wrapping up, maybe a little bit more introspective, almost like the water sign energy.
It's the completing energy.
Yeah.
It's a completing energy. It's like I need to tidy this up, and so some people tend to run in cycles in their life. They'll do something and then they move to the next thing, and then they accomplish that. And then because they're cleaning up a bunch of, it's the final phase of the eight. So,
And this is
yeah,
one thing that when you are doing a natal chart for somebody, you always zero in on this.
always, I know I talk about the moon sun journey and the rising sign. Of course, it's how people see you, which is not who you are, but it is how they see you. That's the time of day that you're born. And then the next thing I go to is the moon phase because I'm like at a soul level. This is what's driving. It's like you need to at least a confident set that Saturn in motion.
So, what are some checkpoints, right? So, when we're starting out as the moon and we're growing into our sun, is there kind of like a few magical moments, like at a Saturn return or something like that, where you should really have grown into your sun by now? Or if not,
You
is
hope,
you
you
hope,
hope.
right? Yeah.
I have met people that in their 60s that are still responding with moon energy. I find that kind of sad, but I think 14 is probably the first big shift because that's the first. Saturn is maturity, and I believe Saturn rules Earth. I think it's our work on Earth, but Saturn has a 29-year cycle in our solar system. That's how long it takes to go around the sun. So right around 29 years old, you have your Saturn return, which is maturity, adulthood. What am I here? But at 14 and a half, 14 to 15 is when you get that first shift in maturity. So, you have kids, you'll see that 14 to 50, that's why those teenage years, they're not a child anymore. And that moon starts to fade a little bit and they want to start picking up their sun. Well, it's still raw. So sometimes they don't handle it so well, but it's okay. That's why teenage years are rough. They're trying to do less moon, more sun. And then you get to 29 and you get 28, 29. That's a fascinating time because Saturn return. And so the soul says, hey, what does maturity look like here? Some people go back to school. Some people get married. Some people buy a house. Some people quit their job and do something new because they're like, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. But it's a decision time about what do I want the next 29 years of maturity to look like? They're not conscious of it if they haven't studied, but it's still happening.
Mm-hmm.
The astrology works like gravity. There's a divine plan. And the coconut's still going to fall from the tree, whether you believe in it or not. It doesn't matter. It'll still hit
Right.
you on the head. So that's what I tell people. There are universal laws above, our human concept. So electricity and gravity are two of them. And so is the magnitude of the planet, the system. The Saturn return happens whether then you get to 58 or 59, you get to that second Saturn return. It's like, now what? I've done this. What do I want the next phase to look like? So
Mm-hmm.
that's an interesting one too. And now people are living longer. So 969, 79, right around 85, 86, 87, depending upon how fast Saturn's moving. You have your third Saturn return. Well, people used to die then. I mean, that was a real
Yeah.
stuff. That was a big buy. We're out of here. But people aren't doing that anymore. So they may be signing on for another 7 or 14-year cycle.
Wow. And even through all of this, right, you're still blending together your sun and your moon and your rising and all your energies. So it's
Sure.
not ever an either or. It's just kind of like checkpoints on how are you growing.
Right. And then what's the situation? If you're out in the world at work, your sun should, because that's, you're moving forward. That's new. But you go back to visit your family, you'll find your moon reacting much more strongly. Because
Mm,
that's the history.
that's true.
Even as an adult, we are different people in different scenarios.
That's true. It's kind of like that saying they always say, like, once you move away from home, if you go back, you can go back, but it's never quite the
You
same.
never go back. You can't
No.
go back because it's a new time.
And you've
But
grown into a new person, new
you'll
energy.
find that people tend to react with old patterns that don't work anymore.
Mm,
So, that's why they go. That's where therapists do well.
yeah. Well, that actually reminds me of one of the stories you told us in class when you were illustrating this point. You had done a group reading at one point with a group of sisters, I think. And I remember you recounted that they all had a very different remembrance of their upbringing, and you
Yeah,
were
there
blown
were
away.
five women. And the first one came to me and she wanted to understand her natal chart. She was pretty progressive. And so we did her chart and we talked about the fourth house of the chart and the family and how she perceived her family and her mother and her father. And she adored her parents. Now, these five kids all grew up on the same large farm in Ohio. They were very comfortable. They had a lot of land. And the parents had five girls. So the sister decided she wanted to pay for all her sisters to have a chart reading. So I did hers, and she loved her parents. They were wonderful. In her chart, the sun and the moon were in very positive relationship, and she had a really positive fourth house of home family. Then I do the next one, and she adores her family, but her parents, but she sees them very differently. I looked at moon as the mother, the sun tends to be the father. But this is interesting. We get to the third one. Now, all these girls grew up on the same farm, never moved, same parents. She couldn't stand them. She went to college and went to California and never came home. And she said, my parents were not nice. They were not nice people. And I'm like, okay, I've got two sisters who thought these people walked on water. They were so loving and kind. Her whole response and her whole relationship to this was and so then the next one said, oh, well, I just really didn't care for him. I went and became a dentist and moved to Northern Ohio. I'd visit once a year, just totally detached from them, totally disconnected. And then the last one said, well, I was the peacekeeper. And so I just tried to keep everybody together. And so I always checked in with my parents. Things fine, but I was the one that tried to make everything work. And I'm like, so I had these five all raised, same house, same farm, same schooling, same nothing. I mean, their parents didn't divorce. And really, their parents had not had like huge different seasons of their life. Evidently, they're pretty consistent, which the farming community would be. But I learned a lot from that experience. And that's why I
Yeah.
shared it with the students. I'm like, you have to understand that the soul has a different, and your own children may very well see you very differently. So if you know where their moon is, which is the mother, you might understand how they would see you.
Because really, each of our charts is our experience, our
Yes,
perception of the same reality.
correct. And, it's just like an accident scene. You ask four people that were at the accident scene, and they'll give you four different stories about what happened
Yeah.
because their perspective and their vision was different. So it's the same thing, but the chart is very interesting because it tells about the soul perspective. And so quite often I will say, if it's a fourth house issue, at some level, the soul chooses the chart and chooses the family. So you had something to learn here and it made you stronger. So be grateful for it,
Yep.
as opposed to being angry about it.
Yeah. It's choice.
Sometimes they don't want to hear that though.
Right. Well, and speaking of the soul path and the soul choice and the soul journey, let's bring in the lunar nodes because that is another really big piece of it. Why don't you orient everybody around what they are and their significance in this lens?
Well, the moon goes around Earth every month. Like I said, every 27 and a half days, 28 days. And it catches up with the sun every 29 and a half days. And we have a new moon or a full moon. That's the moon sun relationship. So that's pretty common. But the moon has an orbit, and so does the sun. The sun's orbit is the ecliptic. And that's the path that we see the sun going around Earth. So that ecliptic path is what we read. That's our calendar. That's our zodiac. But the moon has an orbit that's slightly off tilt 5 degrees. But where the moon's orbit intersects the sun's orbit is where it's where the moon's soul memory, passes the energy to the sun. So this nodal axis spiritually has been recognized since the times of Babylon and Egypt. Physically, they knew about eclipses because there are cuneiform tablets that are 2,000 years old in some of the Middle Eastern museums that calculated the eclipses. Now, an eclipse is when the sun and the moon either have a new moon each month or a full moon, but when it lines up with the nodal axis, we have an eclipse. We have 2 eclipse seasons a year. And that's when the either new moon or full moon is tied to the nodal axis, which the nodes are the intersect point of the moon sun on 2 ends. So if the moon is going down below the horizon, the ecliptic, it's called the south node. It's going away. When the moon's orbit is coming back up, it's the north node. So that even in Chinese astrology, and certainly in Indian astrology, the nodes were on this because they tied to this moon sun soul connection. So in your natal chart, the nodes give you a soul indicator, the south node being old, what you've already done. So when you look at the moon in the south nodes, you have much more understanding about what you've already finished. You don't just, and I would say to people, let's not just keep doing this over and over. You ran around that track. Let's do the sun north. That's your growth, that's your becoming. The moon and the south node tell a lot about the history of old, and the sun and north nodes about your growth. If you know that, when you come to a crossroad in your life, you can make a better choice. You're like, for growth, I better go this direction. Now, some people don't want to do that. We have free will. God gave us dominion over the earth. He did not tell us what we had to do. So the only thing we have to do is die. That's kind of free will. But and that's even a soul choice. That's normally, unless you interfere. But
Right.
we have free will. So astrology it's not a predestined event. It's a timing tool, but it's still your choice. So south node old, north node moon. It's nice to know where they are. And yes, when I see clients, I always discuss them.
And what would you say when, the sun is with one of the nodes or the moon is with one of the nodes, especially if it's the opposite, right? Because the
Well,
moon is the past history and so is the south node. What if the moon is in the chart right next to the north node? Or like some of these combinations, like what would you say
you
about
get
that?
if you get the old moon with the new north node, then it's a redo. Like, whoops, I got to rework this energy.
Like
Like
I've
that.
done this before
It's
and
like,
I've got
whoa, I need to refine this. I need to take it up. I need to clean this up. If we're talking about the palette, the paint palette, whoop, this needs work. It's not bad. It's just information. So, or if the sun's with the south node, the same thing. It's like, whoa, here I am. I'm going to pick up where I left off and try to finish this. So, not everybody has, but I do look at the relationship between the sun, moon, and the nodes.
And even on that, you mentioned that one sister that had I don't know if it was a sun moon square or it was some heavier, trickier aspect that contributed to how she saw her parents. Do you find that, if the sun and the moon are in a conjunction or a sextile or a trine, that will be an easier way, an easier path
Well,
forward?
sure, that you see that parenting relationship is easy. If it's a square in opposition, you see them in conflict, or it's conflicting with your idea of what it's supposed to look like. They might not think you're
Mm,
in conflict, but that may be how you're perceiving it. So remember that charts are perception because it's our soul pattern. It's our soul history. And so it's the window we're looking out of. If you're looking at the Great Circle, it's what window are you standing at? Because somebody else is standing, a sibling may be standing in a whole different place looking, and they see something totally different. So,
yeah.
judge not your fellow man, lest you be judged. What can I tell you?
Yeah. It's wild. Well, Pam, do you have anything else you'd like to add on any of this or any practical advice that you have for anybody, how they approach their chart or their
Uh,
life or
uh,
anything?
Well, few things are don't just read your chart and think it's cast in stone. It is not. We have free will, we have choice. we should have squares and some struggles in the chart because that indicates where we're going to grow. And so you don't just want all trines and sextiles and ease because it would be a boring lifetime. I mean, yeah, you could get on the sled and ride down the hill just sitting there and with no bumps, but and then you'd be like, well, that was kind of interesting. Okay, I did that. But so our challenges are our growth. So, lean into them, be grateful for them. So even when you're having a rough time, say, wow, wonder what the lesson is here. How can I use this to grow? The challenges are not evil. So I would say, understand, be kind to yourself, and don't run from change. Change is part of life. And at my age, I have learned at least that is breathe into the change. So I guess that's what I would leave people with, particularly with all the planetary craziness we have going on in the world right now. And the next few weeks, I mean, Uranus will leave Taurus and go into Gemini, and we've had all this Aries build up. It's been a fiery, restless time. It's going to pass. By July, we have lots of trine sextile patterns coming in that are going to straighten us out. I believe that the universe is a loving universe, and I don't believe it's a punishing universe. And so if we can stay as kind and loving and accepting as possible, let's not contribute to the anger and the fear and the hate. It's, what do you want to contribute to?
Yeah. What do you want to grow? You want to grow the love and the light and the goodness.
Right. So what are you feeding? Because energy follows intent. And so when we think, that's where our energy goes. So if you're thinking about how awful everything is and how angry you are, that's what you're watering. Try to think about something a little better. So that's my word of wisdom for the day.
I love it. And one other thing that you said recently that I hadn't thought of or noticed that I loved was like with Uranus moving into Gemini, it's right there with Venus. Venus is going first, and then Uranus, and right there together in Gemini. So where everybody's kind of freaking out about, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? But Venus is right there.
Venus and Jupiter are considered the great benefics, the givers of light. And so there's some blessing with all of this change. Venus isn't going to let it get too ugly. And Gemini is an air sign. Yes, we're going to see a lot of talk, but it'll flare and then it'll die down. So, like I said, don't beat the lion.
Yep. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. Oh, this was so great. And I have to say, I have grown so much from studying with you, Pam. This experience that I had in school with you for 3 years was amazing. One thing that Pam does that's really, really special is that she actually teaches from all of the charts of all of the students, so that when she'll introduce a concept, then whether it's the sun or Venus or Chiron or any more advanced technique, then we would look at all of our charts and talk about shared experiences. And that really helped bring it home of how different energies could be expressed. So it was almost like a deep dive into my own astrology during those 3 years, and so much camaraderie with really the soul sisters that
came together. Very interesting. Each class has its own personality.
So yeah, I bet.
I always look to see what the universe is going to put together.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we start in September. We break in June for the summer, and it's a 3-year, 500-hour program. Midwest School of Astrology. That's how you find me.
Yep, I'll put links in the show notes and everything so that it'll be very easy for people to connect with you, Pam. And I cannot recommend it enough. This is the woman to study with for sure.
Oh, we have fun. We try to.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on here, Pam. And to everyone else out there, thank you so much for listening. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.